heavy rains that have been pounding central Vietnam since the evening of November 16, 2025, have caused severe flooding in several provinces, including Quang Tri Province, which was one of the most significantly affected. The extreme rainfall, which lasted for more than 48 hours, caused the region's major rivers, including the Thach Han River and the Binh River, to overflow, inundating thousands of homes, farmland, and critical infrastructure across Quang Tri. According to a report from the Department of Dike Management and Disaster Prevention under the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment, this flooding is one of the worst in the past 5 years, with widespread impacts not only physical but also social and economic. In Quang Tri, more than 13,000 homes were reportedly inundated, with water levels in some locations reaching over 2 meters, forcing thousands of residents to evacuate to emergency shelters set up by local authorities and humanitarian organizations. In addition, more than 7,000 hectares of rice paddies and other agricultural land were severely damaged, threatening local food security and farmers' livelihoods. The floods also damaged road and bridge networks, including the collapse of several provincial roads connecting Quang Tri with neighboring provinces such as Thua, Thien, and Quang Binh, hampering evacuation efforts and aid distribution. One of the most tragic incidents occurred in Hai Lang district, where a resident was reported missing after being swept away by strong currents while trying to rescue his livestock from a submerged pen. As of the evening of November 18th, the victim had not been found, and search and rescue teams were still searching along the river. In other districts, such as Tru Phong and Cam Lo, residents reported significant livestock losses, with more than 350 cows and goats and nearly 5,000 poultry reportedly killed or swept away by the floodwaters. Furthermore, irrigation systems and small dams in several villages suffered structural damage, increasing the risk of further flooding if the rains continue. The Quang Tri provincial government immediately activated its emergency response system and deployed more than 500 military personnel, police, and volunteers to assist with evacuations, logistics distribution, and emergency infrastructure repairs. Schools across the province were closed for 3 days, and the main hospital in Dong Ha, the provincial capital, increased emergency room capacity to anticipate a surge in patients with flood-related injuries or illnesses. The central government also sent logistical assistance in the form of food, clean water, and medical supplies, and allocated 20 billion Vietnamese dong in emergency funds to support initial recovery efforts. Vietnamese President Luong Quang, during his visit to Da Nang that same day, expressed his condolences to the victims' families and emphasized the importance of building social and infrastructure resilience to natural disasters that are becoming more frequent due to climate change. He also instructed relevant ministries to expedite the evaluation of drainage systems and embankments in the central region, including Quang Tri, to prevent similar disasters in the future. In his official statement, President Quang emphasized that public safety is a top priority and that the government will ensure all victims receive adequate assistance. The flooding in Quang Tri also impacted the education and economic sectors. Thousands of students were unable to attend classes because their schools were submerged or used as evacuation centers. Meanwhile, small and medium-sized businesses suffered significant losses due to damage to their shops and warehouses or loss of inventory. At Dong Ha Market, one of the province's main trading centers, more than 70% of stalls were reportedly damaged by the floodwaters, with vendors estimating losses in the billions of dong. The local government promised to provide economic recovery assistance, including soft loans and subsidies for affected businesses. Environmentally, flooding brought mud and sewage into residential and agricultural areas, increasing the risk of infectious diseases such as diarrhea, leptospirosis, and skin infections. The Quang Tri Health Department deployed mobile medical teams to provide free health services and distribute medicines and hygiene kits to affected residents. In addition, a cleanup campaign was launched by youth organizations and local NGOs to help clear debris and mud from homes and public facilities. The massive flooding that struck Quang Tri in November 2025 is expected to have long-lasting, multidimensional impacts, encompassing social, economic, environmental, and governance aspects. In the immediate future, thousands of residents faced a humanitarian crisis due to damaged homes, disrupted access to clean water and electricity, and limited health services in the affected areas. Many schools were converted into evacuation centers, disrupting teaching and learning and depriving children of access to education. The damage to agricultural land and the mass loss of livestock threatened local food security and farmers' incomes, increasing the risk of poverty in rural areas. Disruptions to transportation and logistics networks have slowed aid distribution and economic recovery, while the psychological trauma of losing family and possessions will linger for the long term. In the coming months, the Quang Tri region is at risk of declining productivity, population migration to large cities, and social stress due to unequal recovery. Without strong and inclusive policy interventions, this disaster could deepen structural vulnerabilities to future climate disasters. Systemically, this flooding has exposed weaknesses in spatial planning, environmental management, and disaster preparedness. Development in flood and landslide-prone areas without adequate risk assessments exacerbates the impacts of disasters. The lack of early warning systems and disaster education leaves communities unprepared for emergencies. To prevent a recurrence of similar tragedies, the Vietnamese government needs to implement policy reforms that include relocating residents from disaster-prone areas, rehabilitating upstream ecosystems, strengthening river embankments, and investing in disaster-resilient infrastructure. Public education and community training must also be prioritized to build social resilience from the grassroots. The Quang Tri floods are not simply a natural event. They are a stark reminder that climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction must be an integral part of national development. Without strategic and sustainable measures, the cycle of damage and recovery will continue to repeat itself, draining resources and weakening community resilience. Although the rain began to ease on the evening of November 18th, meteorological authorities warned that further rains are still likely over the next 2 days, especially in mountainous areas prone to landslides. Therefore, residents in vulnerable areas are urged to remain vigilant and follow the instructions of local authorities. Search and rescue teams remain on standby at strategic locations to respond quickly to new emergencies. Overall, the Quang Tri floods of November 18, 2025, reflect the significant challenges Vietnam faces in dealing with increasingly intense and frequent hydrometeorological disasters. This event highlights the importance of investing in early warning systems, disaster-resilient infrastructure, and public education on disaster preparedness. The government, civil society, and the international community are expected to work together to build long-term resilience and reduce vulnerability to future disasters.
Quay sang bên cây cầu cho bạn xem một bên. Đấy. Hôm qua thì cây cầu đấy ngập hết mà nước nó lên rất là cao các bạn, nước nó lên đến tận bờ cơ. Hôm nay thì nước cũng rút rồi, ô tô thì cũng lộ rõ ra rồi.